In the quiet town of Ashwood, life moved at a slow and steady pace. People trusted one another, and crime was something they only heard about on the news. Among the familiar faces in this peaceful place were Daniel and Claire Thompson, a couple who seemed to have it all. To neighbors, they were perfect. Daniel worked as an architect, building homes that shaped the town's skyline, while Claire spent her days teaching at the local school, where children adored her kindness. Together, they appeared like the image of love and stability. But behind the smiles and warm greetings was a reality few could have imagined. Their marriage, once filled with laughter, had begun to crack under pressure. Financial struggles were building up, and arguments over bills and late nights at work had become common. Daniel's long hours often left Claire feeling lonely, and resentment started to grow between them. The perfect picture everyone admired was slowly fading, replaced by tension neither of them could escape. On a cold November evening, the couple had dinner at home. It was supposed to be a normal night, but something felt different. Claire had plans to meet her friends later, and she seemed distracted, distant even. When she didn't show up to the dinner with her friends, they assumed she had changed her mind. But when calls went unanswered, concern began to creep in. By the next morning, Claire was still missing, and what started as quiet worry turned into panic. The people of Ashwood couldn't believe that someone like Claire could simply vanish without a trace. Little did they know, the truth was darker than anyone could imagine, and the person responsible was someone they all thought they knew. The news of Claire's disappearance spread quickly through Ashwood. Her friends were the first to notice something was wrong when she failed to show up for the dinner she had promised to attend. At first, they thought she might have gone home to rest after an argument, but when morning came and there was still no sign of her, their concern turned into fear. They contacted the police, and within hours, officers arrived at the Thompson home to begin their investigation. The house appeared undisturbed. There were no broken locks, no shattered glass, nothing to suggest a break-in. Her purse was neatly placed on the kitchen table, and her car was still in the driveway, keys inside. Everything looked normal, too normal. Detectives began to suspect that Claire had never left the house willingly. When questioned, Daniel appeared calm, perhaps too calm. He told the police that he and Claire had argued the night before and that she stormed out, upset. He assumed she had gone to a friend's house or taken a drive to clear her head. But when investigators checked with her friends, none of them had seen her since earlier that evening. The first real lead came from security footage captured on a street near their home. It showed Claire walking back toward her house around 9:30 p.m. after leaving a friend's place. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The discovery narrowed the timeline significantly and raised suspicion. If she returned home, then where did she go? Forensics began searching the property more thoroughly. At first glance, everything was spotless, but small details started to stand out. A faint smear on the garage floor caught an officer's attention. Under special light, it revealed a trace of blood. It was just enough to confirm what everyone feared: something terrible had happened inside that home. Faced with growing evidence, Daniel could no longer maintain his calm demeanor. Hours of questioning broke through his defenses until he finally spoke. His voice was low and filled with exhaustion as he admitted what happened that night. He claimed it was never meant to end this way. According to Daniel, their argument escalated beyond words. Frustration and anger took over, and in a moment of rage, he shoved Claire. She fell backward, her head striking the edge of the kitchen counter with a sickening thud. Daniel said he froze in shock as she collapsed to the floor. He called her name, shook her shoulders, but she didn't respond. Panic flooded his mind. He checked for a pulse and convinced himself she was gone. Fear gripped him tighter than reason ever could. Instead of calling an ambulance, instead of seeking help, he made the worst decision of his life. He wrapped her in a blanket, carried her to his car, and drove to a cabin deep in the woods. The place had been abandoned for years, a spot he thought no one would ever visit. In the dim glow of his headlights, he dug a shallow grave with trembling hands. Each movement felt unreal, as if he were watching someone else do it. When the hole was deep enough, he laid her inside and covered her with dirt and leaves, whispering apologies that would never be heard. Daniel returned home that night numb and hollow, scrubbing the garage floor in silence, hiding the traces of what he had done. He believed the nightmare was over. He thought no one would ever know. But the truth was still buried, along with Claire, and it was only a matter of time before the world discovered the horrifying secret he left behind. The search team moved quickly after Daniel's confession, following his directions to the abandoned cabin hidden deep in the woods. The place was desolate, its walls rotting and roof collapsing under years of neglect. Officers began digging in the area Daniel indicated, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as silence hung heavy in the cold night air. Then, the first shovelful of dirt revealed the blanket Daniel described. They braced themselves for what they were about to find. When the body was uncovered, the investigators expected closure. But what they discovered was far more disturbing than anything Daniel had said. Claire had not been dead when he buried her. The medical examiner's report later revealed something shocking. There was soil in her lungs, clear proof she had been breathing when she was placed in the ground. She had fought desperately to survive, clawing at the earth until her strength gave out. Her fingernails were broken, and the inside of the blanket was torn where she had struggled to free herself. The realization hit everyone like a wave. This was no longer a tragic accident, it was something much darker. Daniel hadn't just made a mistake, his fear and selfishness had condemned Claire to one of the most terrifying deaths imaginable. She had been alive, buried under dirt and darkness, gasping for air as minutes turned into hours, waiting for help that never came. News of the discovery spread quickly, shocking the quiet town to its core. People who once admired Daniel now spoke his name with horror. The image of a loving husband shattered completely, replaced by the truth of what he had done. And as investigators packed up the crime scene, one question lingered in every mind. How could anyone leave someone they claimed to love in such a way? The courtroom was filled with tension as Daniel Thompson faced justice. His case had captured national headlines, and people from across the state came to witness the man who buried his wife alive. The prosecution presented the evidence with chilling precision, photos of the grave, the soil in Claire's lungs, and the broken fingernails that told the story of her desperate struggle. Every detail painted Daniel not as a man who made a single mistake, but as someone who chose fear over humanity. The defense tried to argue that Daniel panicked, that he truly believed Claire was dead when he placed her in the ground. They spoke about stress, about a marriage under strain, and about a man who snapped in a moment of anger. But the jury couldn't ignore the facts. Claire was alive when she was buried. She suffered because Daniel didn't call for help, because he cared more about saving himself than saving her life. After days of testimony, the verdict came swiftly, guilty of murder. The judge sentenced Daniel to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He sat motionless as the sentence was read, eyes empty, his once perfect life reduced to nothing more than a prison cell. For the people of Ashwood, the horror lingered long after the trial ended. Neighbors who once waved to Daniel now spoke of him in whispers, unable to understand how someone they trusted could commit such an unthinkable act. Claire's grave became a place of mourning, a symbol of betrayal and fear. Parents warned their children that evil doesn't always look like a stranger, it can wear a familiar face. The case left a permanent scar on the quiet town, a haunting reminder that even the closest relationships can hide dangerous secrets. And that night in November would never be forgotten.